We have the official closures for Bitcoin on CME Exchange now already in. And the question of the day is, what is the worst case scenario for July as Bitcoin does essentially close the month on its lows? Before we get into that, I want to once again let you know that you can still get all of the products and services in our Teachable store in the links in the description below for 20% off during the sale period for the next couple days here with the code MIDSUMMER100. That is Midsummer, all capitals, I should say, 100. Midsummer, all capitals, 100. Yeah, there we go. You can even get the Krown Quant automation for 1 month for free. Again, the reason why I'm offering it for 1 month for free is because I think anyone who actually uses these tools is going to very quickly realize this seems better to me. This seems better to me having things done automated on on the back ends rather than doing like discretionary types tradings and always having to be at your computer and all that good stuff. Anyways, for me, it's time to get into some actual analysis. So let's jump to it right on over here. Again, that sales goes on for like another couple days. All right, so first things first, Bitcoin has a monthly close now for CME. So that's very likely going to be close to where we do see spot price action close, which officially will close tomorrow night. Not just gonna be the monthly, but also the quarterly and the semi-annual. But here's the thing, Bitcoin on CME did close a fraction of a hair, a very small fraction of a hair, but important nonetheless, above this red moving average, which is a 5 exponential moving average. That moving average is actually positioned at 60,226, and Bitcoin's closing, 60,259, and Bitcoin's closing price on CME for the month of June was 60,325. So just barely above, but it is there. Now, my sort of just very generic, very newbie, very, I think actually in most cases, very accurate rule is that as long as Bitcoin is above the 5 exponential, and especially as long as it has a positive slope, generally it's a bull market. Generally should be looking at any sort of test down to the 5 exponential as as a long-term opportunity. And so far, so good. And you can backtest this, just by looking at it, got the full history of Bitcoin. Again, wicks below that region, completely fine. Just don't want to see any closures below. Yes, there's a few examples here and there where that doesn't necessarily fully hold true, but ultimately it'll keep you safe 90% of the time. And as of right now, Bitcoin is above it. So my personal view, although we are going to discuss what is the likely worst case scenario for the month of July, is that Bitcoin will dig in. It will very likely trade sideways, get extremely boring, extremely boring, similar to what we did see last summer as well, and most summers for Bitcoin, to be fair, and likely start its next move, September, maybe like late August, but probably September throughout Q4 of this year. Of course, we have elections as well, which everyone knows the meme with that. But yes, so far so good. Bitcoin is above there. Now let's discuss the worst case scenario, because this setup, the 5-day setup, is still very much in the background and still very much valid and still very much available. And as of right now, the 5-day stochastic oscillator, which has an extremely high correlation with volatility expansion for this time frame to result in a tremendous move in that direction, is positioned to the downside. So downside is more likely for the downside setups on the 5-day time frame. The historical results have been about 80% when the 5-day stochastic oscillator was angled to the downside upon volatility expansion. We do not have volatility expansion just yet. Obviously, it's been boring as fuck, but things are getting closer, and we just got another 5-day closure last night, and the new pivot is 68,500. One of the biggest reasons why I do say the best case scenario for Bitcoin in July, if you're on the bullish side, is that you're going to get some sideways, because we're very likely to see actually a retest of this long-term trendline regression, which has actually been governing several of the last important lows going back to 2022 before Bitcoin went on tremendous bounces or even macro lows. But yes, right now still favoring the downside, and we are starting to see potentially 5-day volatility expand. Now, personally, I do not consider expansion confirmed as long as you're below 15 percentile, but we're getting the first big leg up on this since basically late April. It's been over a month. It's been a long time. And you're even getting DMI support here for the downside. So this is a downside setup as it stands. The longer that Bitcoin trades sideways here, the more that this will just kind of spin its wheels and then potentially even morph into an upside setup. But for right now, yeah, it's going to be downside. And you can even just kind of extrapolate based off of this oscillator right here that it's going to take 1, 2, 3, 4, probably five, give or take, one from that number, closures before we do see, a real trend line test. And 5 closures on a 5-day time frame is 25 days. Like, that's a long fucking time to put it in perspective. So again, best case scenario is sideways is sideways. But for now, this setup does favor the downside, and there's a higher probability of a downside move from here. Again, that doesn't mean that Bitcoin can't bounce early this month. Could very easily bounce up to like 63 or 64, but that'd still be a lower high, as we'll go over later. Anyways, this setup on average will return a move of close to 40% over the course of just over a month. And the standard deviation on that is actually about 7. So, we're looking at a range of probabilities between about 35% move to even as much as 50% move. Now, I think that that's a lot less likely, but, if we do see 35% move to the downside, that would put Bitcoin at around $47,000. Keep that number in the back of your mind, because it's going to pop up in a second here, actually. And that would obviously position us, basically around end of July, early August. Moving on from there, we can go ahead and reference the monthly HPDR bands here for Bitcoin. And what do you know? The median is just below $47,000. Of course, the more that Bitcoin trades sideways above, especially, 60, this will naturally be dragged up month by month, and maybe even, be around $60,000 by the end of summer. But for right now, that is going to kind of be a magnet for price action, especially as we start to see volatility contraction occur on the monthly HPDRV, representing volatility. Again, like, if there's going to be a major move, it's going to be to the downside in July, not to the upside. Very unlikely, like extremely unlikely we see anything like this. So all of the moon boy, just hopium dealers, that's like the least likely thing to happen. If we're going to see a big move, it's going to be to the downside. If we're going to see the Boolaws show their hand, it's going to be sideways, and maybe a rally to like 64, 65. But yeah, that is in there as well. As of right now, best case scenario for sideways. Moving on from there, we can also check in on the Bitcoin production cost chart, which this chart straight from caprelay.com updates on a day-by-day basis. The one that I typically reference on TradingView updates on about, I think, like a two-week or even a monthly basis. Still gets the job done for the most part, but it should be known right now that the electrical cost representing the basement price to produce a Bitcoin is actually where? $47,000. So now we have 3 completely unrelated things. We have, a fundamental production cost basis. We have a momentum and volatility setup over here. And then this is just historical returns on the HPDR bands. Okay, a lot of different things kind of showing around the same area. Now, we have seen in the past, anytime that Bitcoin has had a halving, that initially that basement price, or just all prices to produce a Bitcoin, massively increase. And then soon after that, as you can see over here in 2020, this is very characteristic of what we typically see, that basement price does take a big step down. Doesn't mean that Bitcoin needs to test down around there, but in all prior examples, we have seen at minimum a long form consolidation, kind of come in within that range for months. I mean, 5-6 months. The one before that in 2016, it did test the bottom side of the production cost, but it did take, this must be like 5-6 months here. Yeah, it basically goes from the halving, which was in July, to the next sort of like major move to the upside. Didn't really start to occur until December. It was extremely sideways, extremely boring there. And I think that's kind of the best case scenario of what we're going to get here. And I do think that's the more likely thing to be happening. But technically speaking, yeah, if things do fall to hell right now, that would be a very obvious area, at least to play like a very nice bounce and probably the next major macro low. But for right now, yeah, things do favor the downside in July. If there is going to be a big volatile move, we probably see it to the downside, a lot more likely here. And basically, as long as Bitcoin's below this pivot, that is going to be the case on this channel. But like I said, my personal opinion is that Bitcoin's going to dig in, might retest these lows. That's fine, but likely bounce from there, maybe put in a move close to like 63, 60, 64, 65 region, hit one of these major fibs here. I think at least, whoops, this is not the right one. Let's go to this one. Do I have it here? No, I don't. I want to do a bearish trace, not a bullish one. Hit at least like 63.5, maybe even 65 here. Completely fine, but that's still another lower high. So It's going to be on the defensive here. I do suspect. I mean, shit, even on the daily time frame, Bitcoin, now that I recognize it, Bitcoin just continuing to trade below that 5 exponential the whole way through. It does work on the daily as well. I mean, this is doesn't really take a genius to figure this one out. But what do I think is most likely if she stayed here all the way to the end? Basically something like this. Retest around the low, blah, 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 pop up early July. And then if it is going to be bearish, we'd expect like a big rejection here, no higher low above 60,000, and just straight fucking down. And it would be nasty. And I think it'd be a very, very quick move as well, seeing as Bitcoin hasn't had like a major move in a while. But of course, I think it's really all going to depend on how, where this next bounce gets. Start to see get back above 65,000 bucks. It's going to start to look pretty good. I don't think that happens in July, but setting up for a move like that in August or September, definitely possible. So yeah, long way of saying best case for BULAs in July, very likely sideways above the current lows. Start to see Bitcoin dip below, especially this month's or June's low, which is about 58,500 bucks on CME. Concerns start to arise for sure. Closure below that regions, concerns are confirmed. Even just a tick below the May lows is good enough for me as well. And very likely we do see, a nice move into the mid upper 40s. So I think that's a good place we'd be leaving off on this video. As always, I like to, I want to challenge myself to kind of entertain the other side of what that would likely look like, to create a plan for that as well. Because that's what trading is at the end of the day. We don't have certainties, we just have probabilities. So I'll leave things right there. As always, I want to wish you the best. Again, just reminding you that you only have, the sale goes for another couple days, and you can still get 20% off. I should write down the code right here as well, seeing as you have made it to the end of this one. Some people they don't understand what midsummer is spelled like. So it'd be like this, all capitals, midsummer 100. There you go. All right. Take care. Much love, and see you hopefully tomorrow for the last day, the very last day of June.